Yo, what's going on guys? This is Unpunk and today we have a new Fire Emblem Engage tier list for you all. In this video, we will be ranking every playable character in Fire Emblem Engage based on their growth stats. And yes, that means there's 36 in this. Obviously, that's going to reflect why the video is long. In this tier list, it will be done based on their overall growths in the classes that they can excel the best in. Their individual stat growths will be showcased with on-screen graphics, meaning their default values, not including class growths for reference. The rankings will all be based off their advanced classes that best work with their innate proficiencies, and we'll be ranking all 36 from lowest to highest. This video does not take into account personal skills, with one exclusion to that, which we will get into later in this video. I hope you guys are ready for a surprise when you see how they're ranked, and leave a comment on your most surprising character rank. Coming in at the number 36 spot is going to be Etier, but actually she ties with Vander and Citrine for the worst spots overall. The reason she made it to the worst spot is basically because I dislike her just a little bit more than the other two. Just kidding on that, but honestly, I just had to pick one and she came first. She comes in the bottom of the list with 230 total points of growth by default, with only being able to reach 320 points in her advanced sniper class, which is what she excels in. Next up, in the number 35 slot, we have Vander, and he's not any better than Etier. When it comes to his total growths, he has 225 by default, while increasing that to a mere 320 points if he is promoted into the Paladin or General classes. Coming in the number 34 slot, we have, as you probably remember from 30 seconds ago, Citrine. She has a total of 240 points by default, which is better than both the others, but when in her promoted Sage class, she only reaches 320 points of growth, the same as the last two. Up next in the number 33 slot, we have Saphir, which is a character that came pretty late in the game, and honestly, I kind of forgot about her right after we got her. She comes in with 235 total points by default to her growths, and a total of 325 points in either the Berserker or Warrior class, regardless of which you choose. Taking the number 32 slot, we have Goldmary. I know there are a lot of people that like this character, but sadly her stat growths just aren't there. Her default growths total up to 240 points, while in the Halberd class, she can reach up to 325. In the Paladin, she can reach 335 total points of growth. This next one will be a surprise for pretty much everyone. Coming in at the 31st slot is Clan. He was my favorite unit in my first playthrough, but to much surprise, his base stats and advanced classes don't bring him up all that much. He has 255 total points of growth by default, in which either the Mage Knight or Sage class really only bring him up to 325. For comparison, the number 1 slot has over 100 more points of growth than Clan does. The 30th best unit based on growths is Ivy. Another surprise when I found out that this was the case, especially since she has her own unique class. Most other royalty units in this game come in around the middle or higher end of the overall class with their unique classes, but sadly, this isn't the case for poor Ivy. She has a total of 265 points of growth by default, and only 340 points in her Lindworm class. After that, we have in the 29th slot, another unit of royalty, being Alchrist. He comes in with the same downfall as Ivy, being low growths at 265 by default, and up to 350 in his promoted class, his unique class. I'm not going to even try to say it correctly because it is a French word, and I would just butcher it, but it says something about elite at the end. The 28th unit on our list is Amber. He is a unit I never gave a chance in my first playthrough, and honestly, I'm not that disappointed in the decision. He came with 255 points of growth by default, and can go all the way up to 350 if placed in the General or Paladin class. You'll start to see that a lot of these classes will be picked as they are just better overall for growths, in my opinion, because we are basically just comparing growths for this video. Another class he does have a decent growth in is the Halberd class, being at 340 overall points. Up in the 27th slot, we have Seal. He joins you around the mid-game mark and is not a bad unit, but he's also not great overall. He has 265 points by default, and can reach 350 points in both the Dancer and Martial Master classes. Another unit that shocked me a little bit until I used them more was Veil, which is on our number 26 slot at 255 total growths by default. The only class I recommend for Veil is going to be the Felchild class, which is specific to her and can only reach 350 total points of growth. Number 25 is going to be Linden, which is a unit that you get fairly late in the game. Seems to be a returning thing that the late game units tend to have worse stat growths than some or most of the early game units, which is a big bummer for me. He has 270 points of growth by default, while moving that up to 360 in the High Priest class and 350 if he stays in the Sage class. The number 24 slot is going to be taken by Panette, which is a crazy hard hitter with tons of HP, but not much else going on for her. She has 275 total growths by default, with 365 in both the Warrior or Berserker classes. Moving on to the 23rd slot, we have Boucheron, which is 270 total growths by default and 365 in both the General or Great Knight classes, which is what he'll excel in. Up next in the 22nd spot, we have Fram. She has better growths than that of her brother Clan, but not by all that much. She comes in with 280 total growths, and that can get all the way up to 365 while in the Martial Master class, which is probably her best class. Zelkov comes in the number 21st spot by right around the middle of the pack. He has 275 total default growths that can be increased all the way up to 360 in the Thief class and 370 in the Wolf Knight class. The number 20 slot is taken up by Louis. He is a fine unit that can hold his own in any difficulty due to his strength and has a 275 total default growths. His growths increase to 370 if he's in the General class. In the number 19 slot, we have Diamant with 280 default growths. Moving him into the successor role will increase those all the way up to 370 points, which is where I start to consider a unit to be good. After that, we have the number 18 slot filled with Tamara, which comes in around the middle of the game, having 295 default growth points. When promoted to her advanced class Picket, she can boost that all the way up to 375. Next, in the number 17 slot, we have Jade. She by default has 280 total points and can bring that up to 375 in both the General and Paladin classes. Next up, we have one of my personal favorite units in the game, although she is not the best. In the number 16th slot, we have Lapis. She comes with 285 default growth points that can increase to between 365 to 380, depending on which advanced class you put her in. In the Paladin class, she reaches 380. In the Halberd and Swordmaster class, she can reach 370, and in the Hero class, she only has 365 total growths. In the 15th slot, we have Yunaka, which we all know is a fan favorite, and sad to see she's not a little higher on this list. She by default has 285 total growths, which increased to 370 in her Thief class and 380 in her Wolf Knight class. In the number 14 slot, we have Fagato coming in with some decent default growths, totaling 300 points. These can increase up to 385 when promoted in his Cupido class, which is a pretty solid growth overall. Another well-rounded unit is our number 13 slot, being Marin. She has 290 total default growth points, which increases all the way to 385 while in the Wolf Knight class. Technically, both Marin and Fagato tie for these slots, which was just luck of the draw that Marin was picked on the higher of the list. Moving on to our number 12 spot, we have Hortensia. Now, she was a surprise to me at first, but looking back, it makes sense due to her popularity. She starts out as a unit you get later in the game, and thusly, to keep her relevance, you need to have higher stat growths so that she can keep up with the characters you've used your entire playthrough. She has 295 total growths by default, with 390 in her Sleipnir class. Now we are really starting to get to some of the best growths in the game. In the number 11 slot, we got Celine, which comes in with 310 total base growths, and that can increase all the way up to 390 in her VDAM class. I believe, again, I said that one correctly, but who really knows? Most of these are in different languages that I don't know. In the number 10 slot, though, we're going to be moving on to Pandero, which is another unit you unlock around the middle of the game. He has a total of 300 growth points by default, and that can increase to 390 in the High Priest class, which is probably his best class. The 9th best unit based on growths goes to a fan favorite being Alfred. He has 295 total growth points by default, and if promoted into his Evanier class, he has an increase to 395 total points. Next up in the 8th spot, we have Bunet, which has a total of 300 growths by default. He is not someone I use, so I can't speak on how great he is overall, but when you promote him to either Paladin or Great Knight, he comes up with a total of 395 points of growth, which is great on paper. After Bunet, we come into the number 7 slot, which is everyone's favorite toothpaste Chan, Colgate, also known as Lear. They have 305 points of growth by default, with an increase all the way up to 395 as the Divine Dragon class. They obviously are a must-have for any playthrough, as the game doesn't let you not use them. Coming in the number 6 slot, we got Chloe, to which whom we obviously all really like. She has 315 growth points by default, but when switched into the Wyvern Knight class, that can increase to 405 points overall. She is a much better Wyvern Knight than the Griffin Knight, but we can discuss that in her character video, which we'll have out at a later time. The 5th best unit in Fire Emblem Engage, based on overall growths, is going to be my favorite, Rosado. He has 315 total default growths that will increase all the way up to a whopping 405 points if in a Wyvern Knight, and 410 if you choose to make him a general. Taking the 4th spot is going to be Anna with 325 growth points by default. If you promote her to the Sage or Mage Knight classes, that increases to 405 points. And the High Priest class boosts her to 415 total growth points. She is a unit that starts out pretty weak, but can quickly become a great unit to have on any difficulty. The 3rd best unit in the game is going to be Kagetsu. Just like Felix though from Three Houses, he has some of the best growths in the game, as well as one of the best units in the game. He comes with 320 total points of growth by default, which can increase to as high as 415 points in the General or Paladin classes. He also makes a great Swordmaster, having 405 total growth points in those classes. The 2nd best unit in the game is going to be Jean. The reason he is the 2nd best is actually due to his personal skill expertise. He has a total of 240 growth points, which is very low in compared to a lot of the high tier units. But with his personal skill expertise, it allows him to double all class growths. When he is promoted to the general class, he has 430 total growth points. In the Sniper, Berserker, and High Priest class, he is at 420 points, and in the Halberd, Swordmaster, or Martial Master classes, he has 410 total points. Overall, he can become a massive player in any difficulty with these incredible growths, as well as he is extremely versatile and can be useful in basically any class you put him in. Coming in at the number 1 slot, we have a surprise for me, which was Mavier. He comes in way towards the end of the game, like 3 or 4 chapters before you beat the game, but he is a very powerful and versatile unit to have on your team. He has 345 default growths, while being promoted to the Royal Knight class increases to 440 points. He also does good in the Sage and Mage Knight classes with 425 total points of growth. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video and learned something new about some of your favorite characters in Fire Emblem Engage. Don't forget to let us know your favorite character down in the comments below, and subscribe for more of the best Fire Emblem videos you'll find here on YouTube. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and we'll see you guys real soon. Peace!